The secret formula.
Hey guys, welcome back to Storgy Stories. I'm Anthony.
I'm Daddy.
This is the game plan, a series on where we should go and maybe where you should go on your future trips to all 30 stadiums or to any city that has an MLB stadium. We are today talking about
Atlanta, otherwise known as Hotlanta, otherwise known as the ATL. 15 other nicknames I'm sure that I'm forgetting. But it is the destination big city metropolis of the South. It is the home of the Atlanta Braves, which stole the Milwaukee Braves back in 1966. We will forgive them for that.
Yeah.
We took a lot of notes in the city. We want to show you the best 5 spots to go to. Before we do that, however, we need you to do something for us. We need you to go, you see that red button on your YouTube video where you can hit the word subscribe?
Yep.
That might be helpful. It'd be awesome if you can do that for us.
Yeah.
It will give you all the videos coming into your YouTube feed for every single game plan video that we do and every video that we will eventually do when we get back to traveling, when all this stuff is done and we're back to normal. We're going to start though with your top 5 spots to go to in Atlanta.
Yep.
And it is in alphabetical order, not necessarily in terms of preference. So just going alphabetical, the first stop is right downtown. Most of these are going to be right downtown.
Yep.
And it is
The College Football Hall of Fame. It's really cool with some great exhibits, including the quad, which let's talk about the quad.
The quad.
You go through a tunnel, you pick your favorite college football team, and you walk out of the tunnel and your team's helmet lights up, and it's apparently a really cool experience. I wonder if they have a Marquette helmet.
We would have to check if they have a Marquette University
Yeah.
football helmet. They are undefeated since 1960.
Woo!
When they ended football. So that's why, as long as I grew up here in Wisconsin, I was a Wisconsin Badgers fan. Was proud to work for the Badgers radio network for 3 years. We also have an affinity for where your mommy is from, and the
Mountaineers.
West Virginia Mountaineers, as well as the Marshall Thundering Herd. So there's certainly a lot that we would be researching there as well. I will have to check to see if there are any Marquette grads in the College Football Hall of Fame. I bet there are. This place actually used to be located in South Bend, Indiana.
Wow, of all places where Notre Dame is located.
But they wanted to move it to a city that's really a college football hub.
Yeah.
And they did it in Atlanta. And also the amount of kid-friendly stuff
Interesting.
that they have in this place. You could go off with the amount of activities like trying to pummel down blockers and pummel down tacklers. And all safe, all fun. Just a short distance south of there is your number 2, and it's actually a really cool spot to just devote a few minutes to and check out in Atlanta, but you wouldn't normally think of it when you think of just what the title of the place is.
The Georgia State Stadium parking lots.
Why would you go to a parking lot?
So it has the Hank Aaron wall,
There's a reason.
essentially where Hank Aaron's 715th home run landed. For us Milwaukee baseball fans, Hank Aaron was a hero to the city and state with the Braves.
Still, in my book, the true home run king of all time. Yeah. And that home run was at the spot of the old Atlanta Fulton County Stadium.
Yep.
And it was not just one of the most historic in terms of baseball history, but in much deeper meanings. Atlanta is a city filled with the history of the civil rights movement, which we'll get into in a short time as well. But it's a city where so much has happened when it comes to civil rights. And that home run happened, little buddy, when obviously, and there's still racism today, and we could have an entire video series just on that, certainly. But Hank Aaron was going through so much racism at the moment. The 714th home run happened on opening day in 1974.
Yep.
He was at 713, one behind Babe Ruth for the entire offseason. And during that entire offseason, he collected how many thousands of letters?
I don't know.
From fans, but thousands of letters with so many of them being racist, hate mail, and death threats. And and he was going through so much turmoil because of the color of his skin. And as Vin Scully said when he was calling that home run on the Dodgers radio network, this isn't just a wonderful moment for baseball and for Hank Aaron. It was a wonderful moment for the world to see an African-American man getting saluted in the Deep South for breaking Babe Ruth's record. And that's why that home run means so much more.
Yep. Yeah, the wall is there, as well as the Olympic torch, and I'll let you give some more insight on that.
Okay, I don't mean to be the one taking all of your information here, but 1996 Olympic Games were in Atlanta. And the site of that stadium was just south of Fulton County Stadium. And they had a separate Olympic torch from the stadium. It was still connected to it, but that was the Olympic torch that Muhammad Ali lit in 1996 to open those games in one of the most breathtaking, meaningful moments, I would argue, in the history of the Olympic Games. Because of the condition that he went through. Battling Parkinson's disease, and he was battling that until his death, which came, I believe, about a decade later. But he was in the throes of it, and yet he still had this moment. And again, a civil rights pioneer lighting the torch in Atlanta for those games. We can see the torch. Little Buddy's number 3 spot may be the spot that means the most in terms of the history of the city of Atlanta, and really in the history of the United States in so many different ways, especially the last half of the 20th century.
The Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic Park, the neighborhood and area where MLK grew up, the church that he spoke at, his childhood home, and just so much more with so much history of the neighborhood and his life.
Why does MLK mean so much to you?
Just what he did, and it's just something we've talked a lot about in school, and a lot of things that are important to a lot of people with what he did in the 60s.
Especially now with what's happening in our times here in America. Just to be able to take you to the place, the very house where he lived, the house that he preached in at Ebenezer Baptist Church, right on that very site. There's also the entire museum of his legacy, which is the King Center for Nonviolent Social Change. And you see the World Peace Guard, because he was so much about nonviolence in the way that he approached making societal change, making changes in social justice for the United States and far beyond. And his burial place. You actually get to be at the place where he's buried.
I did not know that.
Yes. That is what I think is sort of the capstone of the experience at this place. It has been on my bucket list. Number 4 is a less important pilgrimage in terms of the deeper issues of life, but a good sports pilgrimage for us.
State Farm Arena. Reasoning? Not to go to a game.
No, not a game. Not a game.
To see the site where Marquette won a national championship in 1977. We are Marquette.
Yep. That was the site of the original Omni Arena. That which was built in the early 70s, and it hosted the Final Four in 1977. Its last event there, I believe, was the Olympic Games before they tore it down, and it became the home of
the Atlanta Hawks.
Along with the Atlanta Thrashers hockey team, which, well, they've moved since then, but it is right in that area by CNN, right in the area by the Georgia World Congress Center. This huge area complex of so many different corporate headquarters and conventions and stadiums. Just think of the fact that Al McGuire walked that area and his players in the coolest looking basketball jerseys ever made. I mean, if you could describe them a little bit.
Sky blue with some gold, some white jerseys as well, which are the ones they wore in the championship.
And they were untucked.
Yeah, they were untucked.
They were untucked and looking so stylish when they won Marquette's only national championship and surprised the basketball world. As Dick Enberg said on the broadcast on NBC that night, Basketball's Don Quixote. The
Yep.
impossible dream is realized, and we can go right to that place.
Yeah.
And number 5 on our list is, well, the biggest reason why we would go to Atlanta and why we will go to Atlanta. It's to see our Brewers against the Atlanta Braves at
Truist Park, formerly known as SunTrust Park. For those who are like, what is Truist Park? Now it is called Truist Park.
I cannot wait to see a lot of the Milwaukee Braves memorabilia
Yeah.
go to a game there. Like the old Milwaukee Braves jerseys, you can find some of them in the elevators of the stadium.
Interesting.
Hank Aaron's 715th bat and ball, the statue at Monument Garden, his MVP award from 1957,
Wow.
and the 57 World Series rings.
Yeah.
Yep, the hardware right there.
And one just cool quick fact,
Yeah.
about somebody that actually works at Truist Park. I don't remember the last name, but Walter is his first name. He gives sometimes tours to fans around the stadium.
Ooh.
If you ask him to, he's been there for years, and I think he said on YouTube that he's been there pretty much ever since Fulton County opened.
Oh my gosh.
Because when
That's like 57 years.
yeah, he's a usher there. If you can find him, he might take you into some of like the memorabilia areas and show you around.
Now, do you have to bribe him for this? Do you have to like promise him like some barbecue or like his
No.
favorite beverage?
Just tell him Zach Campbell sent you. And
Shout out to one of his favorite YouTubers.
yeah, look right there. And so just say that, he'll know who you're talking about, and he'll take you on a tour.
That is your top 5 activities to do in Atlanta. I've got my own top 5, which are usually piggyback because we give him first dibs. The first of those is at another stadium in Atlanta because we are sports fans. It's Mercedes-Benz Stadium and an Atlanta United game. Not a Falcons game, not a Hawks game or anything like that.
Nope.
Atlanta United, the MLS team. In recent years, that team has sort of really swept up the spirit of the city and really added to it in such unique and fun ways, taking a lot of the European soccer traditions
Yep.
and Atlanticizing them. All the different cultures of the people of Atlanta in such a multicultural city come together and have so much fun. And then there's always the fun fan marches that happen at soccer games, and Atlanta probably blows everyone else out of the water. Maybe Seattle might be in that class because they draw so many fans for Seattle Sounders games, but it is regular to see 40,000 people
Yeah.
at an Atlanta United match, and the crowd there doesn't sit down for 90 minutes. Your legs will be tired. My number 2, again in alphabetical order, one of the latest presidents of the last 50 years in America, Jimmy Carter. He is from Atlanta. He is still with us, by the way. And he has his own presidential library in a park in Atlanta, the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library and Museum. It has a life-size replica of his Oval Office, just like the Reagan Museum did when we were there back in California. We didn't see that, but
Yeah.
they have it. It has a replication of the cabin where the Camp David meetings were held, just outside Washington, D.C., where he took the heads of Israel and Egypt, who were at war, and took them just out into a natural setting for a few days of negotiations to try and help them produce a peace treaty, and they did it in 1979.
Wow. Interesting.
And there are a bunch of different interactive experiences there as well. Number 3, in a suburb of Atlanta, there is a place called Eddie's Attic. It's in Decatur, Georgia. It's east of the city. It is a nightclub, but it's a nightclub he can get into. It is maybe the premier acoustic venue in all of the southeast region outside of Nashville.
Yep.
If you want to take a look at who got their starts there, you know who John Mayer is?
Yep.
He could probably play guitar just like you do air guitar when you do Cleveland Rocks. So, yeah. John Mayer can do a heck of a lot better than that, but I love your air guitar anyway. Jennifer Nettles of the band Cumberland, you know who she is?
Yep.
They got their starts there. And they got their starts at I believe it was a Monday night singer-songwriter open mic that happens there. Anyone can theoretically sign up, and they just go up for a couple of songs that they've written themselves, and it becomes a competition that goes over weeks. If you win, you can then advance to the next round and possibly get to the finals. And some of the best singer-songwriters in America won this competition. And yes, they serve food there, and yes, what do they serve?
Chicken tenders!
Any place with great music that's got chicken tenders, yeah, that's worth going to. Number 4 on my list goes back to the civil rights theme. It is somewhat close to the Dr. Martin Luther King National Park, that area of Atlanta. It is the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. It explores the history of the civil rights movement in the United States in so many years. You have displays from Dr. Martin Luther King that aren't at that same center.
Interesting.
Where he's located. It reviews the Freedom Riders who, especially in the early 1960s, these buses of protesters who came south from northern territories, especially, interracial buses of people who fought for civil rights for African Americans at the time, many of whom lost their lives during some of the protests.
Yeah.
The history of the lunch counter and segregation in the South. Plus, it looks at human rights movements outside the United States.
Yeah.
For example, Mahatma Gandhi and what he did in India during the middle part of the 20th century, which really inspired Dr. King in a lot of ways to do what he did when it came to nonviolent protest. I absolutely want to check that place out. And then finally, my last in our top 5s, in alphabetical order, it is a tribute to your aforementioned APAP, who's now in a better place. It is the world of Coca-Cola, and that is because APAP loved his Coca-Cola. Do you remember how we would have bottles of it at home?
In the fridge, you'd either see a Coca-Cola or a Budweiser. We do not influence Budweiser at all.
We do not suggest Budweiser, but yes. Coca-Cola we're good with, and it was the traditional original recipe, by the way, of Coca-Cola. It's not what you get in the cans now. It's the more high sugar level Coca-Cola, which if you had one of them, you'd be
For some reason, I just don't like the fizzy part of it.
That's probably a good thing when it comes to your health, but the point is at this place, and I'm not usually big on going to museums involving corporate brands just to show it off, but I'm doing it for this, for APAP, who's such a tremendous human being. You get to see the vaults of the secret formula.
Boom, boom, boom.
They have tons of memorabilia from over 30 countries and all the different Coca-Cola ads and products through the history of this quintessential American big company. You can see how Coca-Cola is bottled. They actually have an example of the bottling process of Coca-Cola. You get to meet the polar bear.
Is there like an actual polar bear mascot there or what?
I believe it's a mascot. It's not the real polar bear, obviously, but it's a mascot of the famous Coca-Cola polar bear that shows up during Christmas time.
The real polar bear is somewhere in the North or South Pole.
I would hope so. And you get to try up to 100 or maybe even more different Coca-Cola products from around the world.
Oh my God.
And that's because they market different types of drinks to different countries for different people's tastes based on their cultures.
Yeah.
So we could be tasting exotic sodas from Southeast Asia, from Eastern Europe, from Africa. Oh my gosh, the palate would go crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. And speaking of crazy palates, guess what we got to talk about in our next video about Atlanta?
Restaurants. Woohoo!
And chicken tenders!
And you'll see a lot of that on my list in the next video. Before you go, make sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell, go to the cards, see what we probably put some stuff in there. Go down
those
to
little things that you see above.
Yep. Go down to the description. You'll see stuff down there that might be cool to look at, some links to different websites and that sort of stuff.
Yep, we're looking at all these different places that we're describing here in this video. So next week we will have the Atlanta series continuing the top 5 restaurants for each of us.
Yep.
His ode to chicken tenders will definitely be a theme. For Little Buddy, I'm Daddy. Euchroify us out here, please.
Song from the Sorgy Story Studios in Milwaukee.